Discover the amazing revenge of a grandma, an incredible journey to unexpected justice. Grandma Ruth sat at her oak kitchen table, her hands lightly dusted with flour as she kneaded cookie dough into a comforting mass. This was her ritual, one that filled her cozy home with warmth and the sweet scent of chocolate chips. Every Sunday, the rhythm of her life revolved around family. But when the letter arrived, the one stamped with the official emblem of Landcorp, a shudder of disbelief coursed through her. They planned to demolish her home, the legacy of her husband's family, to erect a sprawling shopping complex. It was unfathomable, a blow that ripped through the fabric of her tranquil life. As she stood in the familiar dusky warmth of her kitchen, the shadows of doubt began to creep in. What could a retired schoolteacher like her do against a multinational corporation? She felt her fingers tremble, not just in disbelief, but also fear. Ruth had always championed her students in the classroom, yet standing against this kind of greed felt like an insurmountable obstacle. Would anyone care enough to stand with her? Would she be alone in this? With a mix of desperation and determination, Ruth summoned her old friends from the depths of her mind, books that spoke of the little guy winning against the corporate giants. Dust settled on her shelves, a thick layer obscuring the tales of heroes who stood up for their homes and their families. As she poured through the books and scanned old articles in the library, a fire ignited within her. She uncovered stories of neighbors who had faced similar threats from Landcorp. Every tale fueled her determination, and every name became a reminder that this was not merely her fight, it was shared among many. Then, as if on cue, betrayal reared its ugly head. Her old friend from the neighborhood, Sam, had something to say, something that twisted like a knife in her gut. "It's just business, Ruth," he said, dismissing her plight without a second thought as he scuttled off to a meeting with the very corporation that threatened her home. How could he abandon her? A rush of anguish rolled through her, a moment of sheer disbelief that turned into a wild torrent of self-doubt. What if he was right? What if this was all futile? As days blurred together, Ruth wrestled with the idea of standing alone. Each piece of the puzzle draped a heavier weight of despair upon her shoulders. Were her efforts making a difference, or merely pushing her further into isolation? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The town hall meeting loomed ahead like a storm cloud. Tonight, she'd stand before her neighbors, facing the intimidating presence of Landcorp. Her heart raced as she clenched and unclenched her fists, her breath growing shallow in her chest. What if her voice cracked? What if her words fell flat? Yet deep within her, there was a flicker of hope, the belief that perhaps the stories she shared could resonate, spark change. But as she prepared to address the crowd, she felt Sam's betrayal beneath her skin, like a tangible darkness threatening to swallow her resolve whole. With each heartbeat, the reality set in. She was not merely fighting for a house but for the very essence of her family's legacy, and the truth that lingered behind each cookie she baked and each memory she cherished. The stakes had never been higher, and as she took a deep breath, eyes scanning the familiar faces of her friends and family, an anxious question loomed large in her mind. Would her time of learning and teaching return, or would this moment be the end of everything she held dear? The room buzzed with energy as voices mingled, rising and falling in an anxious cacophony. Ruth stood at the edge, the weight of anticipation heavy upon her shoulders. Overhead, fluorescent lights flickered, mimicking the uncertainty that coursed through her veins. She could hardly recognize the hybrid of determination and fear shaping her very essence. Tonight was not merely a matter of speaking, it was a reckoning. As the clock ticked closer to her moment, her mind churned wildly. In that oft-repeated phrase, "just business," she saw a reflection of the world as indifference. How had it come to this? The thought churned within her until she squeezed the folder her notes tighter in her grip, a soothing rhythm against the rising tide of anxiety. She had poured hours into this, collecting facts, statistics, and testimonials that could bolster her case. The cacophony diminished as the town mayor, a familiar face, took the stage. First came the town updates, and with them, predictable politeness draped like a thin veil. Ruth felt her stomach tighten. What if she faltered? What if everything she had rehearsed evaporated in the face of that corporate powerhouse? Each clapping hand of support felt like a distant echo. She wondered if the same hands that applauded would be willing to stand in solidarity when the bulldozers arrived. Guilt gnawed at her for doubting them. But she couldn't ignore the reality. Sam's betrayal plastered itself like a tattoo on her psyche, rendering every cheer a reminder of the lonely battle ahead. When her name was finally called, Ruth's heart raced as she took slow, deliberate steps to the front. The lights blared. For a moment, every face blurred. Inside her mind, she inhaled the past moments spent laughing, sharing recipes, and harboring dreams in the home that breathed her husband's legacy. She imagined his hand on her shoulder, lending strength. "Thank you for being here tonight," she began, her voice unexpectedly firm. Energy surged through her as she warmed to the topic. She felt every story unfolding beneath her fingertips, her role as a teacher re-emerging, guiding each word. Each anecdote about her home, her memories. She painted a narrative, folding in the stories of those similarly affected by LandCorp's ruthless ambition. Then, acknowledging the looming presence of the corporation, she shifted her focus. "We are not just houses on a map," she pressed, the audience now visibly engaged. "We are families, history, and dreams. If we're silent, we risk losing all of that to make room for chains and glass." As the words flowed, she caught a faint grin from someone in the crowd, an old friend from the neighborhood who had lost their home years ago to a different development project. A flicker of solidarity kindled in her spirit, overshadowing the memories of betrayal. She wasn't alone, even if it sometimes felt like it. When she finished, applause erupted, rippling through the crowd. It was applause stamped with something more than sympathy. It was respect. Ruth felt adrenaline coursing through her veins, a heady mixture of triumph and trepidation. But as she turned away from the podium, a sense of accomplishment flourished, mingled with dread of the battle ahead. The realization struck her hard: the company would not back down merely because she had spoken her truth. As she stepped down, she forged her resolve anew, ready to navigate the intricacies of their power structure. She needed to map a strategy to develop her stand against LandCorp, deeper than a speech. With that purpose swirling in her thoughts, Ruth reflected: how could a retired schoolteacher possibly devise a plan against a vast corporation? It was exhilarating and terrifying, a paradox that beckoned her toward arduous growth. With each passing day, she would need to master a skill set she had never fully relied on. The time for comfort was over. It was time to step out of her familiar, warm kitchen and embrace the vulnerabilities and strengths hidden beneath her grandmother's apron. Standing amid the echoes of applause, she quietly determined that she would rise to meet this challenge head-on. But what was lurking behind the curtain of this corporate takeover? What surprises awaited her as she delved deeper into LandCorp's machinations? Her journey of unexpected justice was only beginning. As Ruth settled back into her routine after the speech, the adrenaline began to wane, leaving her exhausted yet lit with purpose. Every morning, the coffee pot's gurgle signaled a shift within her. The comforting aroma wrapped around her, juxtaposed with thoughts of LandCorp's plans. How did one woman stand against a corporation that seemed to operate beyond the boundaries of morality and community? With her heart still racing from the previous night's adrenaline, she scoured the internet for legal documents, zoning laws, and any relevant information that could offer her an advantage. She quickly realized she had a lot to learn. Legal jargon flew past her like foreign language, and the intricacies of civil law seemed daunting. The more she read, The more she felt the tight knot of self-doubt tighten, she was merely an ex-school teacher, not a legal expert. But determination began to reign over insecurity. Narrowing her eyes, she made a conscious decision. Ruth was not just going to be a passive player in her life story. She would become her own advocate. With newfound focus, she began to document everything: her conversations, legislative meetings, and reactions from neighbors. Each note served as a distinct thread weaving into a coherent strategy. That weekend, her modest kitchen transformed into an operational headquarters. Papers spilled from every inch of counter space, each stack representing a different facet of her fight against Landcorp. She felt like a historian, piecing together the timeline of grievances and injustices. Ruth was on a mission, and this was her battlefield. As she pieced together this patchwork of information, she discovered a chilling connection. Landcorp had been involved in numerous controversial projects, all marked by similar tactics: bulldozing local culture beneath the guise of progress. With each revelation, Ruth's resolve deepened, and so did the urgency. She was not just defending her home, she was standing against an all-consuming entity determined to erase entire histories for profit. One afternoon, a phone call changed everything. She had intended to contact a local preservation group for support, but instead, she found herself on the line with Emma, head of a nonprofit determined to protect urban landscapes from rampant development. Emma's passion and knowledge flooded through the speaker and rekindled hope in Ruth. Their conversation transformed her feelings of isolation into a burgeoning alliance, illuminating pathways Ruth did not know existed. Days passed in an exhilarating blur, her connection with Emma fueling her like a fire. They exchanged ideas, strategy, and even horror stories: land deals gone wrong and the manipulative tactics developers employed to secure votes and silence dissent. Ruth began to outline a plan, enlisting Emma's experience to fortify her grassroots campaign. She discovered that she could weave narratives of loss and resistance, using them to gather support. Just as the synergy took root, Ruth stumbled upon an unexpected setback. The development company's lawyers began sending cease and desist letters to various community members who had voiced their support for her cause. Panic rolled through her, but it was also galvanizing. It contained an unmistakable challenge. They were not just an adversary, they viewed her as a threat to their plans. The tension mounted, and she felt herself at a crossroads. Should she retreat in the face of such intimidation, or should she harness that fear into a rallying cry for her community? The answer lay heavier on her shoulders with each passing second. Ruth understood instinctively that this was the moment she had to decide what kind of protagonist she wanted to be in this story. The stakes were rising, and so were the risks. The countdown to confront Landcorp directly was drawing near, and with it, the question hung in the air: would she yield to their pressure or become an unwavering voice against them? Ruth felt the weight of the letters pressing down on her like a lead blanket, suffocating and oppressive. Every word in those documents seemed to echo, challenging her right to stand against the machine that was Landcorp. They had reduced her supporters to whispers, scared into silence even before she'd launched her campaign. For a moment, she considered the implications of retreating. What would that say about her? About the legacy of those who came before her? Breathe, she told herself, forcing her fingers to unwind from their anxious grip on the edge of the table. She had a choice to make, and panic would not serve her now. With each exhale, she summoned the clarity that had emerged in the past weeks. The courage she had felt in her conversations with Emma needed to manifest now, more than ever. That evening, as the sun sank below the horizon, casting a warm glow across her cluttered kitchen, Ruth set out to convert her anxiety into action. Not wanting to stall any further, she picked up the phone and called Emma. "We need to strategize," she urged, revealing her plan to rally the community in the face of threats. Emma's enthusiasm was immediate. "This is precisely the response we need. Your story is powerful. We will craft a narrative that cannot be silenced. They want to intimidate you. Let's flip the script." As they spoke, Ruth started to feel the pieces coming together. She realized that it wasn't just about the letters or the corporation's legal might, it was about her ability to communicate a vision rooted in shared values and stories. Through Emma's suggestion, they began sketching out ways to amplify their message not just in legal terms, but emotionally, talking directly to the hearts of her neighbors and allies. Over the next few days, Ruth conducted her research with a fervor that amazed her. She began crafting a presentation for an upcoming community meeting, where she would reveal LandCorp's true side. She dug through archives, piecing together the histories of neighborhoods consumed by unchecked development, the unique charms erased by concrete and steel. Every morning, she would stand before the mirror and recite phrases that sparked her resolve. I am more than a teacher, I am a protector of our heritage. I am a voice. I will not be silenced. Gradually, the knots of self-doubt began to unfurl, giving rise to a sense of agency that made her feel powerful. As she prepared for the meeting, she identified specific stories and statistics that would resonate within the community. Ruth crafted compelling narratives that showcased not just the loss of homes but the destruction of identities. She imagined the faces of her neighbors, the elderly who had raised families in those homes, and the children who played in the now-threatened parks. Each story was another weapon in her arsenal, her revenge against a corporation that assumed she would bow to their bullying. The night of the meeting loomed large in her mind, filled with anxious anticipation. Would the community listen? Would they rally alongside her? It was a risk, but for the first time, she felt like she was stepping into her role as a leader, not just a participant. As Ruth entered the dimly lit community hall, the air thick with tension and curiosity, she paused at the entrance. This was not merely a presentation, it was her declaration of war against the corporate giant. She was ready to face the consequences of her choices not just for herself, but for everyone who had quietly endured too long. Now was the time to confront her fears and embrace her purpose. The moment had arrived. Would this gathering solidify her newfound resolve, or would it be the beginning of an even darker battle? The murmurs of the crowd washed over Ruth as she stepped into the room, the weight of their curious gazes like a spotlight on her skin. She felt both naked and empowered. Every heartbeat echoed her resolve to reveal the truth about LandCorp. As she glanced around the space, she noticed familiar faces, their expressions a mixture of concern and anticipation. Each pair of eyes seemed to hold a history of the neighborhoods and homes they cherished. With a deep breath, Ruth approached the podium, her heart racing and determination igniting within her. The microphone seemed to resonate her energy as she adjusted it, looking out at the sea of faces. Thank you all for being here tonight, she began, her voice steady and clear. The initial anxiety receded, replaced by a pulsating sense of purpose that surged through her veins. She started with stories, their stories of long-time residents displaced for the sake of profit, of community parks turned into parking lots, of children's laughter swallowed by machinery. Each tale was not just a recounting but a declaration, an unearthing of suppressed memories that ebbed and flowed through the community like a forgotten melody. As she spoke, the energy in the room shifted, heads nodded, and the tension began to ease. Ruth connected their individual narratives to the broader implications of unchecked development. Statistics flowed from her lips, forging a link between their realities and the systemic forces that threatened to obliterate their existence. The more she spoke, the clearer her message became. This wasn't just an attack on physical spaces but an assault on their collective identity. Gradually, whispers transformed into supportive murmurs, each one weaving itself into the fabric of Ruth's message. The realization dawned upon her, this wasn't merely about advocacy, it was about empowerment. She had become a conduit for the voices that LandCorp attempted to silence. A flicker of hope ignited within her, strengthening her resolve to grow as a leader amid adversity. Together, we have the ability to change this narrative, she said, feeling the energy radiate from the room. We are not just inhabitants of this land, we are its heartbeat. And our voices matter. But even as cheers rose around her, a nagging doubt wormed its way into her mind. Was she enough? Did she possess the skills to organize this movement, to protect her home and community effectively? As her speech drew to a close, she sensed the weight of an impending battle, a deeper conflict lurking just beneath the surface. Post-meeting, as neighbors approached her with promises of support, she maintained a bright smile, yet the internal turbulence remained. Emma's words echoed, "Let us flip the script." Ruth knew that while she had gained a powerful foothold tonight, they were still up against formidable opponents. The show of solidarity bolstered her spirits, but the enormity of what lay ahead loomed even larger. In a moment alone, as she reflected on the night, she found herself questioning her abilities, leadership skills. Each face that had looked to her for hope also reflected the weight of their desperation. Ruth realized that she would need to cultivate not just a message but also the strategies to ensure that they could sustain this movement. The path ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but the flickering candle of resolve within her burned stronger. She couldn't afford to let doubt snuff it out. Her vision for their community depended on her. Just as she felt an inkling of clarity blossom, a chilling thought swept through her: what if Landcorp retaliates with more than just legal threats? With her newfound determination mingling with newfound anxiety, Ruth understood that this was only the beginning of a much larger fight. As she stepped out into the cool night air, she vowed to prepare not just to defend her community, but to become the leader they needed. But it would require more than just words. Ruth knew the stakes were rising. She had to confront her fears head-on. How prepared was she to face the formidable resources of Landcorp? The battle for her home was only starting, and she would need to muster every ounce of courage and strategy she could find. The night wrapped around her, cloaked in uncertainty. The time had come to face not just external threats but the very doubts that threatened to undermine her journey. She mused as she made her way home, eyes set on a future that had just begun to unfold. Ruth barely slept that night, the weight of her responsibilities pressing down on her. The events from the meeting replayed in her mind, each word she spoke echoing like a mantra. She grappled with the need to transform her emotions into concrete strategies. The messages of support filled her with warmth, yet the shadows of doubt loomed ever larger. As dawn broke, she found herself making a mental checklist not just of tasks, but of the kind of leader she aspired to become. Preparing herself for the day, she acknowledged a new determination coursing through her. She would not back down in the face of uncertainty. She started with research, diving into resources on community organizing and advocacy tactics, scribbling notes fervently. The world of activism was unfamiliar, but her resolve propelled her forward. Could knowledge be her armor against Landcorp's aggression? By mid-morning, she felt a compulsion to connect with others outside her immediate circle. The neighborhoods surrounding her were woven into the fabric of her community. Each street, each corner resonated with history. It struck her, perhaps these connections could yield allies. She pored over a map, identifying key demographic areas that needed to be brought into the fold. It was no longer just about her confidence, it was about rallying strength from every corner of her community. With renewed purpose, Ruth ventured out, ready to engage her neighbors. She approached families once engaged in friendly debates about local events but now reframed their conversations about Landcorp and how it wasn't just tearing up real estate, it was dismantling the community's shared story. Each interaction chipped away at her earlier hesitations. She discovered unexpected talents within herself: her knack for persuasion, the genuine empathy in her tone, and her hunger for coalition building. Transforming her scattered hopes into an actionable plan, she organized a weekend meetup at a park. This time, it wouldn't be a rally, it would be a brainstorming session focused on solutions and strategies. As she prepared her presentation, she found herself feeling exhilarated rather than terrified. She was no longer just a mouthpiece for the community, she was becoming the architect of their collective will. As the days passed, she noticed her anxieties ebbing slightly, replaced by a burgeoning sense of capability. Still, in quiet moments, she felt a nagging reminder that Landcorp was not a foe to be underestimated. Their resources, The influence those thoughts gripped her thoughts like a vice. How many experienced leaders had crumbled under the weight of adversity? The stories flooded her mind, leaving her conflicted about her own stagnation. Amidst this whirlwind, she found a semblance of clarity. She decided to seek mentors, seasoned activists well-versed in fighting corporations. They would guide her, offer insights into inquiry, strategy, showcasing the nuances of negotiations she would have to engage in. Ruth reached out, feeling a mix of anticipation and trepidation for what support could unravel. The weekend approached, and with it the meetup. As she stood in the park, setting up makeshift chairs and refreshments, a sense of purpose enveloped her. Ruth could feel her leadership evolving, though the specter of LandCorp loomed heavily, gnawing at her spirit. What would it involve to outmaneuver them? What sacrifices would she need to make along the way? When the first families arrived, she noticed their eyes reflect a flicker of hope she had ignited but had yet to harness fully. Each handshake, every welcoming smile fueled her tenacity, hinting at an intricate journey ahead. In those moments, she questioned if her resolve would be enough, if her evolution as a leader would meet the demands of this escalating conflict. As laughter and conversation began to flow, Ruth recognized that the trials she had faced were just as important as the victories she sought. This gathering could be the launchpad for unimagined resilience, she mused. Yet, with that burgeoning excitement came an increasing realization: she needed to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. Her thoughts danced to the whispers of retaliation from LandCorp, an ever-looming threat that echoed in the corners of her mind. Could she safeguard the very essence of her community? Just then, a familiar figure approached, their presence a reminder that even as she grew, the stakes were raised. Ready to face the challenges ahead? They asked, a knowing glimmer in their eyes. With grit tightening her resolve, Ruth met their gaze. She was no longer just dreaming of what it meant to lead, she was living it. Yet the question of whether she could truly stand resilient against formidable opposition remained unanswered. As the meetup unfurled in a tapestry of voices and shared concerns, Ruth stood at the center of it all, the pulse of hopeful discussion wrapping around her like a warm cloak. Each person had come in search of answers, and Ruth, now a line of defense against encroaching despair, forced herself to absorb their energy. She directed conversations, guiding them towards the strategies she had dived into with enthusiasm, her own voice carrying conviction even when self-doubt buzzed faintly in the background. Together, she began, excitement threading through her words, we can build a response that claims our rights. Let us not just react, let us position ourselves strategically. The crowd shifted, intrigue swirling like a breeze. They sought guidance, and suddenly, sharing her insights felt less like a risk and more like a necessity. As she facilitated brainstorming sessions, Ruth observed how others lit up when they began forming connections and piecing together viable plans. The room buzzed with ideas of petitioning city council members, cataloging local residents' stories, and perhaps even utilizing social media to amplify their voices. Each suggestion resonated within her, reflecting not only their unity but her evolution as a leader. She wasn't merely representing them, she was empowering them to reclaim authority over their narratives. But as the sun dipped lower in the sky, a whisper of anxiety still lingered in her thoughts. Would these newly formed alliances withstand the pressure to come? Would they scatter like leaves in a storm when the onslaught from LandCorp arrived? The stakes became less abstract, her reflection casting shadows on the faces that looked to her for strength. A soft, hesitant voice pierced her thoughts. Ruth, what if LandCorp decides to retaliate directly? What if they just bulldoze through us? It was a question that sliced through her optimism, revealing her own fears, a deep vein of mortality that accompanied every action she took. Ruth hesitated, swallowing hard as the weight of responsibility contorted her stomach. They might, she finally said, each word laced with both truth and resolve. But fear cannot dictate our actions. We need to anticipate, to protect what we hold dear. Her voice steadied, fueled by a commitment she hadn't fully realized until that moment. The vulnerability of her position sparked a fire within her. After the meetup, Ruth found herself at her desk, the glow of her computer screen illuminating the late hours of the night. Earlier that day, she had collected contact information from participants, but now she felt the pulse of urgency set in. She learned the art of persuasion didn't just live in spoken words, it thrived in clarity of vision and rigorous planning. The quiet echo of her fears became a backdrop, whispering that knowledge was the strength she needed to forge ahead. She stumbled upon case studies of successful grassroots coalitions that had confronted corporations head-on, pulling together resources strategically, emphasizing negotiation as a form of power. The complex web weaved together stories of resistance professionals who transformed community grievances into potent legal challenges, advocates who learned to navigate bureaucracies artfully. As dawn approached, Ruth's mindset shifted. Here was the blueprint for her strategy. She could act with intent, channeling the fears she faced into a relentless pursuit of justice. However, while Ruth swelled with a newfound sense of authority, an unsettling thought lodged itself deeply within her. The unity, though budding and bright, could fracture under the relentless gaze of LandCorp. She realized she needed to prepare not just for engagement, but for actual confrontation. Turning her thoughts back to the weight of responsibility, she made a mental note to reach out to those mentors she considered. Instantaneously, a disquiet simmered as she thought about negotiating with seasoned, corporate-savvy individuals who thrived in a world of fear tactics. After all, could she convince them that every family in her community was worth fighting for? The prospect of securing allies who could back her strategically unnerved her, igniting the tension of anticipation coursing through her veins. Determined to rise from her self-imposed constraints, she resolved that morning to make her next call. The air bore a charged sense of change, and with it came a decision. She could either press forth and confront the specter of LandCorp with a fierce resolve, or let her fears paralyze her. But what would happen when she faced the opposing counsel in a very public battle for her community? Would her newfound leadership survive the trial she now planned to instigate? The morning light spilled through the window, illuminating Ruth's cluttered desk, each piece of paper bearing witness to her evolving strategy. Today marked a turning point. The weight of her commitment pressed heavily on her shoulders, yet it invigorated her spirit. She needed to act, and her first task was to connect with her mentor, Harold, a retired attorney whose courtroom prowess was revered, yet whose own battles against corporations had left scars. Ruth hesitated, tapping her fingers against the desk before picking up the phone. The vibrations of uncertainty rippled through her, but she dismissed them, refocusing on the urgency of her mission. When Harold answered, his warm, steady voice provided a balm for her fears. "Ruth. It's been a while. How can I help you?" "Harold, thank you for taking my call," she started, her voice trembling. "I need guidance. My community is facing an aggressive development from LandCorp, and I want to challenge them, but I am unsure where to begin." The pause on the other end felt monumental. She could almost hear his mind whirring as he processed her intent. "You are stepping into a daunting arena, Ruth. It requires meticulous planning and firm resolve. What have you gathered so far?" Ruth detailed her ideas: the community stories, petitions, the outreach platforms. With each word, her confidence surged. Harold listened intently, occasionally interjecting with a question, pushing for clarity. By the time they'd concluded, Ruth felt a surge of empowerment she hadn't anticipated. "You have a solid foundation," he encouraged. "However, the terrain gets trickier once you engage legal counsel from LandCorp. You'll need to prepare a comprehensive strategy, complete with research and community involvement metrics. It's not merely about having a voice, it's about having the proof to back your claims." His advice ignited a spark within her. She needed more than words, she required leverage. Ruth mulled over his suggestions throughout the day, jotting down every thought that came to mind. The enormity of her task was daunting, But she reveled in the challenge. As the day wore on, Ruth delved deeper into her research, poring over planning documents, zoning laws, and historical precedents. She found solace in the details, embracing the intricacies of municipal codes and regulations. Each section uncovered led her closer to understanding the corporate machinery she faced. But amidst her fervor, a visceral fear gnawed at her insides. What if she uncovered something so powerful and damning that it would attract unwarranted retaliation from LandCorp? Could she withstand the backlash if her actions collided with their interests? She wrestled with the implications of her quest. This wasn't just about her community anymore, it was a gambit that could change her life forever. That evening, Ruth joined a small, informal gathering of allies from the meetup. The air buzzed with conversations laced with determination and trepidation. Ruth shared her progress, her enthusiasm masked the anxiety brewing inside her. When someone asked about the legal implications of their plans, the reality hit her like a wave. "Are we ready to take this to court, Ruth?" a participant questioned, glancing around the room as if seeking validation. Ruth's heart raced as she contemplated the uncertainty of an open confrontation. "Maybe," she replied hesitantly, "but we need to be strategic. We have to be smart about it. If we challenge LandCorp, we'll need solid groundwork." The words hung in the air, an acknowledgement of the steep hill ahead. Each face mirrored her inner conflict, a mix of anticipation and fear. As the meeting closed, Ruth stepped outside, the dimming light casting elongated shadows. The world felt different, the stakes felt higher than ever. She realized that engaging with LandCorp was no longer just an isolated skirmish, it rippled outward, threatening to impact every facet of her existence. Back home, Ruth couldn't shake the questions resonating in her mind. Did she have the resolve to confront the impending storm? Had she unwittingly opened a door to a battle that could leave her not just a leader, but a target? With the shadows stretching, she sat at her desk once again, heart racing, fingers poised over her keyboard. The next steps loomed large, filled with uncertainty and fortitude. But one thought became crystal clear: she needed to uncover the vulnerabilities in LandCorp and harness them for her own advantage. What would she discover hidden in the corporation's past? A ticking time bomb of information that could either save her community or shatter her ambitions altogether. Ruth's fingers hovered over the keyboard, her mind racing through the hundreds of possibilities that lay ahead. Each keystroke felt like a step into uncharted territory, the thrill of discovery mingling with a deepened sense of responsibility. The documents she had gathered were a tapestry of her growing understanding, but each thread manipulated by LandCorp could lead to a revelation or a setback. She drafted a meticulous outline for her research project, categorizing her focus on LandCorp's past ventures and legal disputes. As she typed, a strange blend of apprehension and exhilaration surged through her. What if the very information she was seeking turned the tide in favor of the community? Or what if it backfired, drawing the unwanted scrutiny of the corporation directly onto her? No, she couldn't dwell on what-ifs. Harold's words echoed in her mind. To succeed, she needed proof, hard facts that would hammer her message home. With resolve solidifying her intention, Ruth decided to break her research into manageable phases, beginning with the legal foundations of LandCorp's previous developments. Days turned into nights as Ruth buried herself in the files, fueled by caffeine and determination. She learned about zoning variances, construction permits, and public records, the very tools that could expose LandCorp's past transgressions. The intricacies of the law started to reveal themselves to her, illuminating pathways she'd never considered. Each new piece of information strengthened her resolve, but also deepened the darkness of her uncertainty. Would the truth she uncovered be enough? One evening, while combing through archived newspaper articles and court records, she stumbled across a case that piqued her curiosity. It involved LandCorp's illegal dumping of hazardous waste in a nearby town, an event long buried under layers of corporate propaganda. Her heart raced as she read about the affected residents who had fought for justice, only to be ultimately silenced through legal intimidation. It was a pattern she recognized, the same shadow of fear that now threatened her as suddenly, the stakes had escalated. This wasn't just about her community anymore. Drawing parallels to her own situation made the implications stark. Ruth had to confront her fear head-on. If she pursued this path, she might awaken a behemoth determined to quash dissent. But that very knowledge also ignited a fire within her. "I want to let them intimidate me," she whispered to herself, feeling a surge of defiance. If there were residents willing to risk everything to speak out, could she afford to do any less? In the midst of her research frenzy, Ruth called a meeting with Harold again. She needed someone to review her findings, someone experienced enough to see potential pitfalls she might overlook. As they walked through the information together, Harold nodded in approval but also offered sobering advice. "You're onto something significant, Ruth. But remember, with that level of commitment, you could find yourself a target. Are you ready for that?" Ruth hesitated, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Could she truly endure the weight of the opposition? Facing down LandCorp with their legal arsenal felt daunting. Yet beneath the fear, a flicker of resolution began to ignite. "I want to help them, Harold. I need to help them," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Then preparation is everything," he emphasized. His eyes bore into her as if assessing her fortitude. "You need to learn how to navigate the delicate dance of public opinion and legal strategy." As they spoke, her vision sharpened, and a plan began to take shape. She would launch a discreet information campaign to rally the community in awareness before the legal confrontation. The legal documents she had organized could be reshaped into pamphlets, an easy read that would inform people without inciting panic. But questions nagged at her: would they rally behind her cause? Would they feel as empowered as she hoped? The reality of her isolation began to settle in, despite the group meetings. Most of her journey was a solitary one. With newfound determination, Ruth began drafting her pamphlet, pouring her heart into every word. As she typed, a mix of excitement and dread pooled in her stomach. She knew the significance of this moment, a deeper commitment to her community and herself. A knock on the door jolted her from her thoughts. Who could it be? As she opened it cautiously, anticipation coursed through her veins. What awaited on the other side could change everything. As Ruth opened the door, she was met with familiar faces from the neighborhood, friends and old students who had supported her cause. They weren't just a random collection of voices but a chorus of shared history and resilience. The presence of her neighbors reignited a fire within her, a reminder that she was no longer isolated in her battle against LandCorp. "Ruth, we heard about your research, and we want to help," said Karen, a former coworker and an enthusiastic supporter. "We've been gathering stories and signatures for a petition. We believe in this fight." The affirmation resonated in Ruth's chest like a drumbeat of galvanizing energy. In that moment, Ruth experienced a powerful transformation. Her earlier doubts began to dissipate, replaced by a solid confidence in herself and the people surrounding her. Together, they represented a force driven by common goals. They were ready to apply their collective knowledge and experiences toward a common cause, protecting their homes and the legacy they held dear. Over the coming weeks, Ruth worked tirelessly alongside her neighbors and allies. Meetings transformed into strategic sessions, where everyone's voices contributed to a multifaceted approach aimed at amplifying their cause. Ruth stepped into her role as a leader seamlessly, drawing on her educational background to facilitate discussions, plan public events, and assemble a compelling case against LandCorp. As she devoted herself to these tasks, Ruth discovered tangible growth in both her abilities and her demeanor. She became proficient in zoning laws, gathering statistics, and understanding public sentiment, all while fostering relationships that deepen community ties. Slowly, but surely, her anxiety morphed into determined resilience. At a pivotal community forum hosted at the local library, Ruth stood before her neighbors, gathered again under the banner of resistance. She had developed a presentation that did more than outline their grievances, it told a story. A story of a neighborhood united not just by homes but by a shared identity. With confidence radiating through her, she articulated their struggles and victories. Each of us has a history that cannot be bulldozed away. Together, we are more than just addresses on a map, we embody the heart of this community. The sound of applause filled the room, a crescendo that echoed her undeniable evolution. As the preliminary hearings approached, Ruth received unexpected news. A local media outlet wanted to feature her story, a proud ex-teacher standing against corporate greed. As cameras flashed and newspapers printed her photographs, she felt a mix of vulnerability and strength. This recognition validated her struggle but also put her under the spotlight. Faced with potential scrutiny, Ruth summoned the courage she had cultivated over the last few months. With a consistent message that focused on her determination and the community's resilience, she articulated a vision that resonated not just with her neighbors, but with countless others who had faced similar threats. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived, a crucial step in their fight. The courtroom filled with onlookers, many there to demonstrate their support. As Ruth walked in, she felt the weight of her journey, the culmination of battles fought in public and in private. She took her place amidst the tension, the atmosphere charged as LandCorp's representatives evaluated their opposition with unabashed arrogance. Ruth stood, steady and resolute, when it was her turn to present. She delivered a powerful statement, fact-based, poignant, and filled with stories of her neighbors' lives. Her voice held the audience captive, and Ruth felt the energy shift. People around her began to see the value of their own stories mirrored in hers, influencing perceptions of justice and humanity. The closing arguments came, and the courtroom buzzed with tension and anticipation. As days turned into weeks, Ruth awaited the verdict, believing in their shared strength and the momentum they had built together. Weeks later, the decision was announced. LandCorp's permit was denied. Ruth felt a surge of triumph wash over her, a victory not just for her, but for her community. That day solidified her transformation. She was no longer merely a retired teacher, she had become a catalyst, a leader who proved that a single voice, when echoed by many, could challenge even the largest of corporations. In the end, Ruth's kitchen, once a mere backdrop of warm cookies and family traditions, now stood as a symbol of resilience. The smell of chocolate chips still wafted through the air, but now it was infused with the scent of justice, unity, and unwavering spirit. Ruth realized that she had not only preserved her legacy but had also cemented her position as a defender of her community. Her heart swelled with an undeniable pride in her achievements and the knowledge that standing up for one's home can lead to profound transformations not just in oneself, but in the world around. This is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help us reach even more people. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Remember, only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.